Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, March 17th, 2016. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And for all of our Irish listeners, happy Mr. Patrick's Day. As it turns out, he was never actually canonized by the church, but still we celebrate, and I'm wearing the green, and Claire is, of course, going off into her Irishness today. So happy Mr. Patrick's Day. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Turning to the presidential campaign, Marco Rubio, who has now dropped out of the race, although he may be looking at an opportunity in the brokered convention, is out there saying that a Trump nomination will fracture the GOP. And, of course, he's got it completely backwards. Kicking Trump out of the nomination will fracture the GOP. Republican voters remember how the People's Choice, Ron Paul, was kicked out by the party leadership in 2008 and 2012. They're watching that video of Curly Hoagland out there saying, voters don't get to pick the candidates, we do. What the heck do you think this is, a democracy? And as a result, the voters are really ticked off about all of this. And I don't blame them. And as a matter of fact, the GOP could literally destroy itself completely if they don't go along with the will of the people. Now then, the anti-Trump propaganda is cranking up literally around the globe, and it's getting ever more hysterical. Over at the BBC, which stands for Brits Buggering Children. Remember the BBC, the network that reported on the collapse of World Trade Center Building Number 7 20 minutes before it actually happened. That BBC is out there saying the Trump presidency is rated among the top 10 global risks. If Trump becomes president, there'll be a new ice age, and there'll be fire and brimstone from the sky, and the frogs will come out of the Nile River and devour your children, and all the rest of that stuff. And basically saying that Trump will disrupt the global economy. Well, this is coming out of the Economist Intelligence Unit. And they don't care about you. They work for the money junkies, and the money junkies are running scared because Donald Trump has his own money. He's not owned by any of the bankers. He's not going to go along with the agenda of continued debt slavery of the people, of plundering the world's population to prop up those private central banks a little bit longer. Let's see, another article coming out of Newsmax. Economic report equates Trump presidency to Islamic jihadism. They didn't get much traction saying he was Hitler. Now they're saying he's ISIS. You know, he's Godzilla. Donald Trump is Cthulhu, and Donald Trump is this. You can practically smell the fear coming out of these institutions. Now, over at Investment Watch blog, they have a little bit more of a realistic headline. The global war machine fears losing its profits if Trump is elected. And over at Breitbart, Roger Stone is saying the GOP establishment would rather have crony capitalist Hillary Clinton as president than Donald Trump. The GOP party leadership is getting ready to betray its own voters, its own members and supporters. They're going to give the White House to Hillary Clinton instead of going along with what you want. That video of Curly Hoagland has gone viral around the web. Everybody is talking about it. Everybody is angry, and they ought to be. This nation is founded on the principle that the will of the people is the law of the land. And Americans are waking up and realize that we have descended into a fascist economic dictatorship. We're an oligarchy. And we always have been to a little extent, but now it's really obvious where the money junkies are out there saying, sit down and shut up. We'll pick the leaders. We're going to pick the leaders that are good for us. We don't care if they're good for you or not. Now, Soros has hit the panic button. He's now throwing money at the Democrats. He's throwing money at anybody he thinks is going to keep Donald Trump out of office. He's that scared of him. Because he's a threat to the oligarchy. He's a threat to George Soros' New World Order plans. He's an independent in every sense of the word. Over at Ex Republic TV, Peter Schiff is saying that it's a lack of confidence in the economy that's driving Trump and Sanders voters, which is probably why we're seeing the stock market get rigged up to higher and higher numbers. So the incumbents can say, the economy is wonderful. Vote us back in. You don't need Donald Trump. The economy is wonderful. No, it isn't. The stock market's up. But that's just a bunch of numbers on a TV set. It doesn't equate to the economic health of the country. And don't take my word for it. Walk down Main Street. Look at the cracked pavements, the rust and corrosion on all the infrastructure, the retail vacancies, the number of homeless. This economy is not working for anybody except the money junkies. And they don't want that party to end. But I think it's long overdue. It's time for a major, major paradigm shift in this country. We're going to take a phone call. Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
First of all, thanks for taking my call, Michael. And, I took a day off from your show yesterday.
Okay.
And
I thought there was an empty spot out there in the audience.
I thought, gosh, dang, how you do this every day? I'll
Coffee.
give you a Medal of Honor.
Lots of that fine Kona coffee.
You're a patriot, man. You're a real patriot.
Thank you.
And I mean that. Everybody listening to your show knows you are. You date back to, the founding of this country type patriot. And I know your grandparents go back, whatever.
Well, one of my ancestors signed the Declaration, Dr. Josiah Bartlett.
Yeah. Well, you got that blood in your vein, bro.
Yes.
That's great. That's why we love you. But, I was thinking this thing with the thing that this whoever you want to call them, the powers that shouldn't be, or the Illuminati, whatever you want to call this global elite with the George Soros creepy people that run this thing. I don't think, for one thing, they estimated the popularity of the internet and how fast the regular schmo, which 50 years ago you'd had no chance. You had to go to the library and dig up something that was a lie. I mean, I can talk to you. So I think they underestimated that. And my question to you is, George Soros and this is back in these riots, that's what's going to. Why doesn't Trump, and maybe he will, he's got the bully pulpit. Why don't he get on there, have some kind of a meeting or conference or something and say, listen, and identify Soros and identify these people behind these riots, where everybody can look it up and say, look, yeah, that's what's going on here.
Well, Trump has said that in his speeches, but the corporate media isn't carrying that. Because remember, the establishment media is out to protect the establishment. And they're trying to find, anytime Trump says or does something that they can use to attack him, and anytime he's on point, they're going to go to commercial.
Well, I know he called out the Bushes, which was really got him a lot of followers right there, because a lot of people that have stayed in the shadows because they don't think they can do nothing. When Trump called out the Bushes, that was huge. But has he identified Soros? Has he identified any of these?
He hasn't identified Soros by name, but I think he identified MoveOn.org, and he basically said that these protesters are organized and orchestrated, which we all know to be true. And in any event, the job of the independent media is to get this information out to the public so that Trump can stay focused on policy. And we don't want to let Trump go on the defensive. He's in a position of leadership. He's ahead of the pack. He needs to stay out there setting the bounds of the debate. And the independent media will be the ones out here keeping an eye on the establishment media and their misstatements and how all these protests and riots are bought and paid for and organized by the brown shirts that are taking root in our country. That's our job. And that's so that Trump can focus on what Trump needs to focus on.
Michael, I'll just say one more thing. I'll let you go. Of course, you're 100% right. But, they're not worried about losing their power. They're worried about losing their necks. That's what they're worried about.
Yeah, and I think there's some justification for that. I mean, you remember in the French Revolution, before the king and queen got sent to the guillotine, it was the bankers. That's not a coincidence. We got to let you go here, Mo, and take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and I'm looking at the We Hate Donald Trump Network, formerly known as Fox News, and they're having all kinds of guests coming on talking about how it's now inevitable there'll be a brokered convention, and, that may not be a bad thing. Now, I've been making the comment that no candidate from a brokered convention has gone on to be president, and I had a listener email me a correction. It does seem that there was one time, back in 1920, when the GOP convention went to 11 ballots, and finally Warren G. Harding won as the nominee, even though he had 6% of the delegates going on in, and he did, in fact, win the election and become president, so I stand corrected on that one. But certainly not since 1920 have we seen a candidate chosen by a brokered convention go on to win the presidency. Now, the brokered convention idea is based on current projections of how many delegates Donald Trump is going to get versus Ted Cruz. But Ted Cruz may be on the verge of self-destructing because he came out with that comment about how anybody who doubts the safety of GMO foods is an anti-science zealot. This coming from a guy who belongs to a church that teaches the earth is only 6,000 years old. And now, of course, we have that video of this fire and brimstone preacher, saying that the Bible commands we kill the gays, and now Ted Cruz coming out on stage, and Ted Cruz is saying, I had no idea what he was saying. Well, you were standing right there, Ted. So between these two, Ted's most recent poll numbers are taking a serious downturn. And so I would request that all of you grab these two articles, the video of the Kill the Gays and Ted Cruz, and that story about how Ted Cruz thinks anybody who doubts GMO is an anti-science zealot, and just share them across all your social media because they're having an impact. All righty. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call here. Joe in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How's it going?
Well,
thanks for everything you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My concern today is Trump speaking at the APEC gathering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that possible win situation looks like a no-win situation. Can you talk me off the ledge?
Well, again, Donald Trump has been very upfront all along, saying that he has to be careful about Israel because he's got business interests in there that will be destroyed if he comes out strongly against Israel. But he is maintaining that he is neutral on the case of Israel versus Palestine. So Donald Trump is going to go to AIPAC, and he's going to go and try and say, I'm going to be a fair arbiter, which is not what Israel wants. Israel wants a president who will do what they're told. And if you read the Israeli media, and even the pro-Israel media in the United States of America, they are adamant that Donald Trump isn't good for Israel. And so at that point, I think, Trump is being a politician. He's in the lead. He's got to try and broaden his support. Even though he's got more than 50% of the support of the American people right now, AIPAC is still a power. And right now, in addition to opposing Donald Trump, AIPAC is desperate to prove that they still control who is allowed to be a congressman or president in this country or not. We've seen all these articles recently in all the Israeli press about how Israel's losing its grip on the U.S. government, and that's a horrible, horrible thing. If we lose that grip, well, they might go back to allowing boycott and divestment and sanctions. They might allow people to actually look at the history of World War II objectively, and we can't let that happen. So, Israel's in a panic over Trump right now.
Yeah, I can see your point, but I can't see them treating him fairly.
No, they won't. They won't. Trump is walking into a lion's den, and he knows it, but he can't simply snub them. So he's trying to chart a middle course. He's trying to reinforce the idea that he is not anti-Israel, he's not anti-Palestine, that he wants to maintain a fair balance, which sounds good to the rest of America, but of course that is absolutely not what Israel wants. Israel wants another slave to Israel in the White House.
I think I would have snubbed them, probably snubbed Fox as well, and just went on my way because they're not going to do anything positive after this.
Well, Donald Trump did bow out on that debate, and so did Kasich, and the Fox has now canceled that debate because it would just be Ted Cruz up there. And there's
sure he didn't jump out of the pan into the fire with this one, though.
Well, it's one or the other. I mean, every one of these GOP debates has all been a let's all gang up and bash Donald Trump fest, and there's no reason for him to go and do that anymore. But there is a reason for Trump to try and mend fences with the more moderate Jewish vote and supporters here in this country. And so I think that's why he's going to AIPAC. It's one of those things where he has to be seen to do that. By the way, a little thing. Has anybody actually seen Donald Trump go to Israel and touch the remains of that old Roman fort, get his picture taken? I think he's the only candidate in like 20 years who hasn't gone through that ritual.
Well, let's hope it stays that way.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. All right, well, listen, I'm going to let you go here, and we're going to grab Steve in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I would think that you would have to release or get rid of any kind of influence or any kind of business that you would have, any holdings with Israel if you wanted to become president of the United States. I mean,
if he's elected, yes, he does. If he's elected, he does. But, Donald Trump understands that the forces arrayed against him. His ascension to the White House is not a slam dunk. But if he's elected, then he does have to put all of his personal wealth into that blind trust. And at that point, the blind trust may decide to pull the investments out of Israel and put them someplace else. That's the whole idea of the blind trust. Donald Trump won't know where his money is, and so that it will not influence his choices. We should have the exact same thing for all members of Congress, by the way.
I totally agree. Now, does that blind trust mean that I could put it in my wife's name and still have control of it?
No. In fact, that's what Bill and Hillary Clinton were doing during Bill's presidency. They were evading the blind trust, and we learned that during the Whitewater hearings when the White House staff said that, yes, there were filing cabinets of financial papers up in the residence part of the White House, and that's a violation of the blind trust. I still think that the fact that Bill Clinton's presidential blind trust was fraudulent was the ultimate motive behind the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vince Foster, because Foster was preparing those trust declarations, but he knew if the trust were ever exposed as fraudulent, he would go to jail because his signature was on the papers. And it appears he planned to resign from the White House staff rather than complete the documents, but that would have brought more attention onto the already 6-month late trust declarations. And I think that's why he was killed, and some unknown party, probably Hillary, completed the trust declarations 3 days later.
Yeah, I agree with that theory. Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break. By the way, looking at George Soros reminds me very much of a movie that came out in 1967 called The $1 Billion Brain. I've mentioned it before, starring Michael Caine, and it's about this billionaire who uses his money to try and start a war with Russia. And the Ed Begley character does seem very much like George Soros. Of course, in the movie, the plot fails, ultimately. Take note, George. And we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. And we got callers waiting on the line, but I want to get back to some of the news stories first before we take those calls here. Now, over at the New York Times, they have an article with Marco Rubio out. Ted Cruz confronts a new foe in John Kasich. And they're saying this is the foe because Ted Cruz wants to go into the GOP convention with just him and Donald Trump and try and take away the nomination from Donald Trump. Ignoring that little tiny problem that Ted Cruz is ineligible to be president of the United States under the Constitution. He was born in Canada of parents who were Canadian citizens at the time. Ted Cruz did not become a U.S. citizen until he'd been in this country for 12 years. He's not even in the same time zone as the requirement of a natural-born U.S. citizen to be president. And under the 12th Amendment, he can't be vice president. Now, the GOP may turn a blind eye to this reality in their haste to get rid of Donald Trump. The establishment media may turn a blind eye because they don't think the Constitution is relevant today. But does anyone here think for a moment that if Cruz becomes the GOP nominee, that Hillary Clinton's lawyers are not immediately going to go right to court to get him kicked out of the race? The GOP leadership is handing the White House to Hillary Clinton, and that is a betrayal of every single Republican voter in this country. If I had investment money, I'd be investing in tar companies and chicken ranches because there's going to be a run on tar and feathers real quick. All righty, let's see. Let's grab a phone call. Mateus up in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, enjoying your show. On topic here, if you join the mafia, you don't have to be told a couple of things. Like, one, you don't rat anyone out. You don't cooperate with the pigs. And two, if you borrow money, you make good on it, or something bad's going to happen to you or your family.
Yes.
So that's the predicament that every government official that's taken money from the pre-existing embedded organized crime, that's the lobbyist money, and the organized crime families that have taken over our government, but they don't have this leverage over Trump. So that's one of the big panics.
Yeah, that's definitely a big panic. And remember what I've said before, that there are two kinds of secrets inside politics. There are the little secrets, like Ted Cruz's sexual scandal, or Rubio had one that was surfacing just as he dropped out, that can be used as fodder in a campaign. Then there are the great secrets, the ones that are so bad they would destroy the entire government. Like the truth behind 9/11, the truth behind the John F. Kennedy assassination, and so forth. And everybody works to protect those. And Hillary's got a lot of those secrets. And one of the reasons we may be seeing the GOP leadership willing to hand Hillary Clinton the White House is so that Hillary Clinton doesn't out a bunch of secrets that would destroy the entire U.S. government, and then they're all out of work. They'd have to go out and find real productive jobs, which is very difficult in this economy they've created.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm spreading the word about this to just at Canadian Tire, and I was just explaining to the guy working there that if you took these politicians and put them into regular society, that you wouldn't want to hire them, you wouldn't want to have lunch with them, you wouldn't want to have anything to do with them. They don't have any skills, they've got a bad attitude.
Most of them have criminal backgrounds.
That they have to offer you. And so these people are just complete useless parasites that are working against we the people. It's like our mortal enemies are in charge of our system. We've been infiltrated. We've been overrun. I agree with Alex Jones where he starts screaming and yelling about this. This is so serious that it's just crazy. And we're all just kind of numbed down and like being polite about it too much.
No, yeah, I agree with you. The time for politeness is over. It's time for us to stand up and scream about this. And I remember when I was a kid back in the 1950s in grade school, and we were seeing all the little film strips about being on lookout for communist subversion of our government, and the commies are coming to subvert our government and take it over from within. And it turned out our government was being subverted. We were just being told to look in the wrong direction. And that's why we are where we are today, with AIPAC getting ready to have their huge convention in Washington, D.C., at which they're going to set the agenda for the U.S. government to criminalize all dissent. We'll be talking about that a little later in the show. Okay?
Yeah, welcome to North Korea. Give me a break. Do you think they're going to get away with subverting the Republic?
As long as we, the people, sit quietly and be polite, yes, they will. I mean, they've been doing it for almost 60 years now. Okay? I got to let you go.
I don't really like...
Go ahead.
I don't really like Donald Trump as a person. I wouldn't even want to have lunch with him, but I'd vote for him. And I'm really excited about the idea of him getting into power. And you know what? The thing about him, he's not evil. He's not working for the bad guys.
No, he wants business to be good in this country here. I mean, I'd have lunch with him. I'd expect him to pick up the check. He's got money. But mostly the attraction of Donald Trump is everybody who's angry with the current status quo. They're going to Donald Trump. And that's why the status quo is so absolutely terrified of him. Okay?
Yeah, you do not have to like him to support him. That's the thing. People say, oh, I don't really like his attitude. So what? That's not the important thing. Like if someone you don't like pushed you into the water, would you refuse someone else you don't like to pull you out? Someone else said that.
Yeah, the presidency isn't a popularity. It's not a beauty contest. It's not the best dressed contest. You know, it's not, voting for the most, the guy you'd most like to hang out with. You're looking for somebody who's going to run the country for the benefit of the American people and the American nation as a whole, and just say the rest of the world's going to have to take care of itself. And Wall Street's going to have to take care of itself, and Israel's going to have to take care of itself, and that's what Donald Trump is saying. He wants to make America great again, not try and, bring about the New World Order.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time right now in general, and it's very exciting to see what's going to happen with this. And thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over here to John in Barbados. And John, we only have a few minutes. What's on your mind?
Okay, Michael. Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
Now, we know she's a criminal, but obviously the federal attorney general isn't going to do anything about it. But
well, she hasn't said that yet. Loretta Lynch is trying to sort of do the boiling the frog slowly thing, and she's out there saying that, if the FBI recommends charges, well, I'm not legally obligated to move forward with it. So she's setting the stage for saying, well, we could waste a lot of taxpayer money, but we're not likely to get a successful prosecution, so we're not going to move forward with an indictment, which is basically a cop-out. But they're trying to break this to everybody slowly, and of course, Hillary supporters are out there saying, well, if the Attorney General doesn't think there's anything there, then stop looking at all the emails and everything and just take the word of the U.S. government that everything is all hunky-dory. And that's not going to work because for the vast majority of the American people, the word of the U.S. government and the establishment media is absolutely worthless. And deservedly so.
I wanted to ask a specific question, really, Michael.
Okay, and ask it because we're almost out of time in this segment.
Right, Hillary Clinton lives in a state. So you say it's Virginia. I don't know where she's registered or whatever.
Massachusetts.
Where she actually lives. Could the state attorney general file charges and indictments against her?
Not on the basis of what we know so far, because the crimes circulating around her email server and possible espionage are federal crimes.
I'm sure she's committed more than just federal crimes.
Well, when we find them out, we'll bring them to the attention of the state attorney general, but I don't expect any more spine in the state attorney generals than we have in the federal attorney general. That's just what it is. Nobody with any spine or gonadal tissue is allowed into government because they cause too much trouble. John, got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the phone calls here, very interesting article out of Aletho News where they're talking about just how much money Wall Street has poured into the Clintons over the last 24 years. And you had all these New York financial institutions, the money junkies. They contributed $11 million to Bill Clinton's presidential campaign in 1992, $28 million for his re-election in 96, $2 million for Hillary Clinton's senatorial campaign in 2000, $6 million for her re-election in 2006, $14 million for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2008, and so far $21 million to her current campaign. That's a total of $83 million coming from Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, UBS, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Wells Fargo, Barclays, JP Morgan Chase, CIBC, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, and Morgan Stanley. Who do you think Hillary Clinton is going to be working for if she wins the White House or steals the White House? Now, while we watch the fight over Donald Trump, there's something else we need to keep in mind here, and that is that Judicial Watch still has a lawsuit going on over that email server. And that's outside government. That's outside the congressional investigation. The congressional investigation was kicked off by the discoveries of Judicial Watch. They're still going strong, and they're getting ready to subpoena a whole bunch of Hillary's staff. They're apparently going to be subpoenaing Stephen D. Mull. He was Executive Secretary of the State Department from June 2009 to October 2012. And Louis Lukens, Patrick Kennedy, Donald Reed, Cheryl Mills, she's one of Hillary's really close friends, and Brian Pagliano, who already has immunity from the Department of Justice for what he did, setting up her clandestine server. All righty, let's grab a couple of phone calls here. Reed in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What's going on, Mike?
I'm sorry.
Well, looks like we're headed. I said, how you doing?
Fine. We got a really bad phone connection. You need to speak a little louder and clearer.
Okay. Looks like with the Trump situation, we're headed towards a contested convention.
That's certainly what the GOP leadership wants.
Now, it looks like, what do you think is going to happen? Are we going to see, 1,000 people with, signs and loud phones, or 50,000 people with guns and,
Well, that's a very valid concern because we know that George Soros is out there paying people to cause a ruckus, to cause violence at these Trump rallies. And they're expecting a major confrontation at the convention in Cleveland. And all it's going to take is for a couple of government-hired snipers on the roof to start shooting people on both sides, and we're going to have the kind of uprising that Obama could seize on to declare a national emergency, martial law, and possibly even suspend the elections. Of course, that would annoy Hillary Clinton, and we know what happens to people who annoy the Clintons. But this thing could very easily spin totally out of control.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy because you're going to have, the pro-Trump protesters.
Now, wait a minute. The pro-Trump people are supporters. They're there to support their candidate. It's the brown shirts who are the protesters and causing the violence.
Yeah, but I'm saying, the anti-Trump protesters, you're going to see there as well with the police. And like you said, if they declare martial law, the military as well. So you got really like 4 different, factions kind of going on there.
It's definitely, the political structure in this country is definitely fragmenting. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. We're coming up on our top of the hour news and commercials, and I need to switch over to James in Ohio. James, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I was thinking, the presidential election is nice, but there's supposed to be a Russian proverb that says, pray to God, but row for shore. I urge everyone not to stop doing whatever they're doing to alert people to our various predicaments. And really, if we could get people out from behind their computers to go door to door and deliver some literature or, with some alt media links printed on it or like What Really Happened, INFOWARS, whatever. And, even if you could take the time to burn 25 or 100 copies of All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, you would be surprised in these times how many people might respond to it.
That would be a very, very good idea. There's also something else you need to remember. If you are in an area with cable television, there's what's called the public access rule. Every cable company has to maintain a public access channel. And you can go in there with a CD, or rather a DVD of All Wars Are Banker Wars, and you can request time to air it. There are a lot of people who watch the community access channel because it is local community stuff. And as a matter of fact, the very first time I saw the Clinton Chronicles by Jeremiah Films was on a community access channel down in Maui. And it was a real eye-opener. And when I was still living in Southern California, I got involved with the local community access channel, and I got a lot of good information out there. So you can do that, or you can try and write an editorial in your local newspaper. But you're absolutely right. People shouldn't be sitting back right now and just wait for what's going to happen. Get on out there. Talk to your friends and your neighbors. Have printed material. And remember, any original content at WhatReallyHappened.com is licensed for full public use and distribution. There's no claims on it. It is yours to use as you see fit to get the word out there to everybody. Okay?
I did use public access television back in 1987 in Cincinnati, and it caused quite a stir. It is an effective medium, but that's what I got to say, so thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. Now then, I want to do a clarification. We had a caller call in yesterday about House Resolution 347. It was passed a few years back, about saying that the First Amendment is illegal, free speech is illegal on any place where the Secret Service happens to be. And I went in and I checked, and that's not exactly what it says. House Resolution 347 was actually a refinement of an earlier law, okay, that says that you cannot enter a protected or restricted area where the Secret Service are operating, places like federal buildings or the White House. It does not, in fact, ban free speech activities when the Secret Service is protecting somebody who is outside in the public arena. So a little bit of a clarification there. House Resolution 347 does not prohibit protests taking place near candidates and politicians, even if the Secret Service is there. That's when the Secret Service earns their money. All right, turning to the international news, French politicians are looking at Russia's pullout of the majority of their forces from Syria and saying, yes, this does prove Russia is not the aggressor in Syria. It's the United States that has been in there for going on 5 years trying to oust Bashar al-Assad and install a puppet regime. Now, everyone's talking about Russia's forces are gone. They're not really gone. A lot of them are gone, but they can be redeployed. And we're already hearing from Russian and Syrian sources that Russia could, if necessary, redeploy with Syrian coordination. And in fact, they're saying that Russia could get those forces back into Syria in mere hours if necessary. And basically what they're doing is sending a message to the United States and its cohorts. Don't interpret Russia's pulling out of Syria as any kind of a weakness and an invitation to a full-on invasion, because we'll be back in there. And Russia did leave behind a lot of forces. The newest Russian Mi-280N and Ka-52 helicopters have been spotted still operating in Syria. And apparently early today, according to Veterans Today, Russian warplanes bombed another column of terrorists trying to enter Syria from Turkey. So they are still very much a player inside Syria, and they're working with the invitation of the Syrian government to get the terrorists, and that's exactly what they're doing. Now then, another story over in Global Research up in Canada, and this at the time when the establishment media is insisting that Syria is committing genocide, Syria is out there, they're killing Christians, all this stuff. There's a leaked Pentagon document where the U.S. government acknowledges that the U.S.-backed terrorists in Syria are the ones committing the genocide. It's just like the sarin gas all over. Our proxies do it, and they try and blame Assad for it. If at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. That is the motto of the United States government. We've got to take a break for commercials and our top-of-the-hour news, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Getting on to the news here again. Ukraine's election commission has ruled out Donbass polls for the next 2 years. Kiev is simply telling those people over there, you are not allowed to have elections. Period. End of discussion. Mahi dictum est. Now, the majority of Ukrainians, and that includes over there in the east, according to the latest polls there, are opposed to the country's current economic course. They think Poroshenko is leading them in a very bad direction. Of course he is. He's leading them into the permanent debt slavery of the European Central Bank. That's exactly what's going on over there. Now, Russia has expressed surprise over this recent decision by a U.S. judge to compel Iran to pay $7.5 billion in damages to families of the victims of 9/11, even though the court admits there is no evidence that links Iran to 9/11. The court's entire decision was that Iran had not showed up to defend itself against the allegations. Now, that is not how the U.S. system is supposed to work. It's supposed to be innocent until proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge has basically gone back to Code Napoleon. You are presumed guilty until you can prove you're innocent. And that is not America. Now, the whole reason for this lawsuit in the first place, and the decision, the $7.5 billion to make it newsworthy, is to lay a propaganda foundation for a coming attack on Iran. Have you noticed how 9/11 has become the rubber stamp for U.S. war? We want to invade Afghanistan. Okay, boom, they were part of 9/11. We want to invade Iraq. Boom, they were part of 9/11. We want to invade Iran. Boom, they're part of 9/11. We want to invade Saudi Arabia. Boom, they're 9/11. They're part of 9/11. That's it. That's what they're using it for. And Russia is correctly pointing out, after all the war crimes that the U.S. has committed in Afghanistan, you know, the arrogance of demanding Iran send $7.5 billion for a crime which even the court admits there is no evidence that they did is ridiculous. It is wholly ridiculous. And Iran, in between bouts of hysterical laughing, has said, we're not going to send that money. You guys out of your mind. Meanwhile, Russia, which, as you know, is decommissioning and scrapping their old Typhoon-class ballistic missile submarines, is now preparing for exercises with its replacement, the newer and better boomer, coming from Russia, and they're going to be running tests on that this summer in the Northern Fleet. Everybody's rattling their sabers. And it is a reminder that even if World War III with Russia goes nuclear, it doesn't mean the U.S. is going to prevail. Now, over in Great Britain, they're still talking about the Brexit. Every day that they have another poll, the shift to move away from the European Union is growing greater and greater in the British population. And the hysteria for the New World Orderists like David Cameron is getting shriller and shriller. And now we're seeing this story coming out of the Daily Bell expressing concern that the Bank of England could intentionally strangle the British economy to discourage the Brexit, because the entire fear campaign being waged against the British subjects right now is if we leave the European Union, oh, things are going to get bad, they're going to get horrible. And they're drawing a historical parallel with President Andrew Jackson, who, when he went on his campaign against the Second Bank of the United States, the head of that bank, Nicholas Biddle, fought back by threatening to contract the money supply and cripple the economy. And ultimately he did so. Congress had to convene a special panic session. But in the end, Andrew Jackson prevailed because everybody had seen the central bank trying to manipulate the situation. And the U.S. managed to get along without a central bank until 1913, when a corrupted Congress and a corrupted president sold us back into the same predatory banking system we'd fought the revolution to be free of. The people in power love to fight dirty. They'll use whatever they can to stay in power. They're not thinking what's right, what's wrong, what's good for the nation as a whole or people. All it's about is clinging to power and authority and wealth, and that's it. And everything that keeps them powerful and wealthy is good, and anything that threatens that wealth and power is bad. They are thinking like medieval monarchs, not like 21st century statesmen and stateswomen. Now, over in Turkey, Erdogan is beginning to show his true colors. He's out there making a statement that democracy and freedom have absolutely no value any longer. He's saying the rule of law has no value any longer. Turkey's going to do what Erdogan says to do. Erdogan is threatening to use Turkey's military against the opposition HDP, which is opposed to the war against the Kurds. He's turning into a tyrant. I had a listener send in an email asking if Erdogan was going to be this prince of the Middle East who starts the Third World War that Nostradamus was predicting about. So if you see Erdogan wearing a blue turban, everybody, time to get nervous. Thousands rally in Spain against the proposed European Union-Turkish refugee deal. They don't think it's a good idea. The EU member states are opposing speeding up talks on Turkey's joining the European Union. Erdogan's just really made Turkey look very bad to the entire world. The German embassy, consulate, and also a German school have been closed in Turkey over a terrorist threat. The only good news coming out of Turkey right now is that a Turkish general and chairman of the Turkish Union of Retired Officers, Lieutenant General of the Turkish Air Force, has apologized to Russia for shooting down their Sukhoi 24 inside Syria. One wonders how long he's going to keep his job when Erdogan finds out. Moscow is calling on Ankara to stop their violence in Turkey's southeast against the Kurds. Erdogan isn't going to be listening at all. He's gone power mad. Classic power mad pattern. Megalomaniac here. Now, India has carried out a test of their nuclear-capable Agni-1 missile. And you're not seeing the White House scream about sanctions against them, like you're seeing against Iran and North Korea. No. They're the good guys. We only sanction the people who won't do what we tell them to do. Israel, drawing its inspiration from Erdogan, is cracking down on their media. They just shut down Palestinian media. They shut down the TV station Palestine Today. They confiscated all the equipment and declared it closed until further notice. And it is a reminder that Israel does not believe in freedom of speech or expression, either in Israel or here in the United States of America. Because going into this next AIPAC conference, their top agenda is to persuade the U.S. government to get rid of the First Amendment and criminalize all dissent. Now, their real agenda is to criminalize criticism of Israel. But they can't say that, or it makes it too obvious that they're just out there to protect Israel at the expense of the First Amendment. So now they're out there saying, we have to shut down dissent because it's offensive, it's it's discriminatory, it's racist. And they're trying to shut down BDS. Now, Jewish Voice for Peace is out there talking about a new House resolution, H.R. 4514, that is being put forward in Congress to criminalize the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Israel believes in dictatorship. Israel does not believe in the Bill of Rights. Are you going to sit there and let them take it away from you? We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And getting on back to that question about Israel wanting to destroy our Bill of Rights, and are you going to let them do it? Here's a good illustration of what I'm talking about. The publisher McGraw-Hill Education has recalled and is destroying all copies of a political science textbook because of a campaign launched by a pro-Israel blogger known as the Elder of Zion, spelled Z-I-Y-O-N, who got his or her knickers in a twist over the fact that the textbook had a set of maps, which the blogger described as anti-Israel. Now, the maps, you've all seen them. It is a map of the Israeli versus Palestinian territory from the creation of Israel to the present day, where it is very clear Israel is growing and taking land away from Palestine. That's not anti-Israel. That's actually what's going on. That's the truth. But because of having to daven to Israel on all issues, McGraw-Hill is taking a financial loss by destroying and reprinting and reissuing all of these textbooks. It's a reminder that the truth is hate speech to those who have something to hide. Israel is stealing Palestinian land. They just don't think you should be allowed to know about it. And they will come into the United States of America and they will force U.S. textbook makers to rewrite those textbooks the way Israel wants them to be written. Let me know when you've had enough. Out at the University of California, their regents have caved in to pressure from Israel, declaring that anti-Zionism has no place on the University of California campus. You can have free speech. You're just only allowed to talk about things we let you. That's not freedom of speech. That's permitted speech. That's tolerated speech. If I were in California and fortunate enough to have children, I would never let them go to the University of California. Because universities and colleges are where the next generation goes to explore new ideas on how they're going to run the world. Not be indoctrinated to serve a foreign government. And that's what the UC has just done. They've turned all of the UC college campuses into Israeli indoctrination centers for your children. Now, another story coming out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. Racial extremists in Israel have set up a hotline where if you see a Jew dating an Arab, you can dial a number and report them so that they can be harassed and punished and hunted down. And they're trying to split up the Israeli model Bar Raffaele, who is currently involved with Leonardo DiCaprio. They don't think that should be allowed to happen. But remember, if you say that Israel is being racist, you're just being a dirty, filthy, Jew-hating anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and gas Jewish babies in the oven. Now, in the realm of silliness, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, is calling for a Mr. Patrick's Day boycott over his abuse of the snakes in Ireland. PETA is saying that Mr. Patrick was nothing more than a sadist reptile hater who took pleasure in killing animals in the name of religion. It's a desperate bid for more ink and more coverage. I'd like to hope that that article was a satire or a hoax, but I don't think so. I don't think so. Let me go back and look at this again. Maybe it's a satire site. All right. Now then, let's talk about the economy. Story coming out of Bloomberg View. The Fed's credibility question won't go away. And they're starting out, does the Fed have a credibility problem? Yeah, it does. Their prognostications and everything that they're trying to do to get the economy going simply are not working. And it's actually very simple. The Federal Reserve, and indeed all private central banks, will have a credibility problem as long as they refuse to acknowledge that the private central banking system by design produces more debt than money with which to pay that debt in order to reduce the world population into permanent debt slavery and transfer all the real wealth of the planet into their pockets. Until they're willing to acknowledge that. The inherent instability in the system, yeah, we know they're lying. They're lying to perpetuate their wealth and power. Another article coming out of Investment Watch blog. The panic is underway. The global economy appears to be trapped in Japan-style stagnation. The only buyer keeping the market alive is stopped buying. And New Zealand is going to join Canada as the newest country to simply give money directly to the people. Now, it sounds silly, but remember what I said about the recycling principle? When you have a pyramid banking system, which is what we all have, and the money is being sucked up to the top, there must be a mechanism by which that money is recirculated down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries for the working class so that they can pump it back into the system, so that they can go to the shopping malls and buy new, hopefully American-made manufactured goods. Under capitalism, we had that recycling mechanism. It was taxes on corporations and the wealthy and put back into the bottom of the economy. Under fascism, that recycling mechanism is the first thing that gets destroyed. And that's why the economy becomes unstable, the wealth inequality grows out of control, and the entire economy starts to lock up. And that's where we are right now. Now, Canada and New Zealand are talking about simply paying everybody money to keep the system going, and it's a solution, but it's not a permanent fix because they're not acknowledging the instability of private central banking. Now, in Canada's case, their bank is owned by the people, but it operates on much the same principles. And don't forget that big stink with the Comer lawsuit, where the charter of the Bank of Canada requires them to make interest-free loans to the Canadian government for infrastructure development, but the Canadian government goes to private banks and borrows that money at interest and sticks the Canadian people with those interest payments. So, publicly owned or not, Canada's banking system is functioning as a private central bank with all of the attendant evils. Meanwhile, we are hearing, courtesy of Russia Today, over in Great Britain, you know, that Forex rigging scandal, $5 trillion a day. The Britain's Serious Fraud Office is admitting they have found evidence of criminality, but they're dropping the probe, saying we're probably not going to get a conviction. They've got too many lawyers and too much money, so we're not going to waste anybody's time trying. That's not what your government is supposed to be doing. The China Ocean Freight Index has plunged to record lows, another indicator that the global consumer economy is shutting down. And consumer spending is a majority part of every healthy economy. They can't fix it because they won't address that 11th marble at the heart of it all. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I did go back and check, and that story about PETA was bogus. And there is a term of propaganda called poisoning the well. The establishment media is losing audience to the independent media. The establishment media can't start telling the truth about anything, or the whole system comes down. So all they can do is try and attack the credibility of the independent media. And sometimes we get suckered in the middle of a show. Somebody will send me something, and I'll talk about it, but we need to go back and check. And one of the latest phenomena we've seen lately is somebody is funding the creation of all kinds of so-called news sites that are totally bogus, and they're trying to feed junk out there. And it looks like real news, and it isn't. This one was called Waterford Whisper News, and there was another one, Weekly World News. That changed their name to Weekly Daily Report when too many people realized what was going on with that. Others were Christian Times newspaper, and so forth. And again, somebody's spending a lot of money and effort to create these totally bogus news sites to try and make the independent media look kooky. And we have to be very much on guard against these kind of poison the well attacks. Getting on back to the economy, unpaid subprime car loans have hit a 20-year high. Look what they did with subprime mortgages in 2008, and they're still doing it. They're still doing it. And the reason they have to do it is very simple. Under private central banking, new money is only created when somebody signs a loan agreement. Then that money goes into circulation, and part of it's siphoned off to pay the interest on the old money. And they have to find new borrowers. And so there's been this rush to try and get more and more people to take out loans for anything, college education, car, home, and they've totally exhausted qualified borrowers. Qualified borrowers who are managing their credit well aren't borrowing anymore. So now they're going out to people with poor credit ratings and saying, your credit rating doesn't matter, we'll loan you money for a car. And not too surprisingly, these people are finding it very difficult to pay these loans because when you're a subprime loan of any kind, the interest rates are much higher because of the risk factor. And so now we're seeing car loans are going unpaid. And they're trapped by this. Not just the people with these loans. The economic system are trapped by this dire necessity to create more borrowers someplace, any place at all. It's amazing how many offers for credit cards I get in the mail. I don't want them. Claire and I are paying down our credit cards as rapidly as we can before things start to fall apart, and you should too. We should be working to get out of debt. We want jobs and paychecks. We don't want another loan that we can't pay. Because the American people are far more responsible than the American government. We don't want to borrow money without knowing for certain that we can pay it back. We're honorable people. The government doesn't care. When they borrow money, they don't have to pay it back. You do. Now, over in Ireland, and this story is true and accurate, Ireland is prosecuting their top banker who destroyed the Irish economy. David Drum, former chief executive of Irish Anglo Bank from 2005 until 2008, when it was taken down during that whole mortgage-backed security fraud, has been arrested here in Boston, Massachusetts. He was hiding out in the United States because everybody knows how banker-friendly the United States is. And he was fighting extradition, but he finally gave up his fight, and he's been returned to Ireland. And you probably will not hear much about this on the establishment media, because this idea of arresting bankers, we can't let that out there. People might actually think it's a good idea. It certainly worked out for Iceland. Their economy is soaring. Now, I want to talk a little bit about computer malware, because if you saw me on BAM User dashing out during the last news break, it's because my wife Claire, just doing what she did, got hit with one of those things that grabs your browser, won't let you close it, saying, you have malware, click this link to fix it. And of course, if you click the link, all kinds of nasty things invade your computer, including malware and ransomware. And she knows now that when she sees something like that, to stop doing, let Daddy come and fix the machine again. And it's very angry. And this is a perfect introduction into the story coming out of the Register in Great Britain, and it's actually in a lot of other places. Malware is no longer a problem with the independent media. Major U.S. online publishers have been serving up ransomware to their readers, including MSN.com, the New York Times, America Online, NFL.com, the WeatherNetwork.com, TheHill.com, Zero Hedge. They're pushing out these booby-trapped advertisements. And this right after the UK Culture Minister advocated government ban ad blockers. So where is the National Security Agency in all this? They're always out there trying to look butch and saying we need to violate the Fourth Amendment and spy on you law-abiding American citizens because we have to deal with criminals and terrorists out there. They haven't found any yet. Edward Snowden's confirmed the NSA has not stopped a single terror attack with all their spying, and when it comes to these cyber criminals and ransomware and the rest of it, the NSA is standing there looking pretty limp to me, unable to do anything about these criminals. According to Kaspersky, the NSA are the criminals. Kaspersky has evidence linking NSA to the Equation Group, which is a global hacking network engaged in these kinds of crimes. Now, there's a new Trojan out on iOS infecting the iPhones and the iPads, and it's exploiting flaws in the Apple's digital rights management system. You know, that system that's a headache to all of us law-abiding citizens and hasn't stopped the content pirates one bit? That piece of code. And again, where is the NSA? Don't you think they could use some good publicity by finding some of these ransomware writers and waterboarding their computers? They could use some good publicity right now. And if they're not finding these cyber criminals, it means they can't. They don't know how, which means they can't find real terrorists and criminals. Their entire job is to spy on you, the law-abiding citizen, to make sure that you know they're doing it, to scare you into silence, the way the Gestapo scared the German people into silence under Hitler. That's their job. That's what they get all the money for. Now, Proton Mail has opened their highly encrypted email service to the public. They have Android and iOS apps, and it's all well and good. I don't see the FBI and Department of Justice going after them just yet. And the fact is that just because it's located in Switzerland does not guarantee it is not backdoored by the NSA. If you really have something to hide, learn to write your own encryption system. We proved it's very, very easy to do. All right. Let's see. We've got a bunch of callers waiting on the line, and I'm going to get to you after this next commercial break, but I don't want to start a call now this close to the commercial break. Okay, let's see. Apparently, a British scholar has been arrested in Istanbul over terrorist propaganda. Erdogan is just going absolutely nutcase over there. More and more people are starting to talk about Hillary Clinton's past record, and that's a good thing. We know that the email scandal is a big one. We know the fact that she may have been selling secrets for donations to her foundation is important. But if you look at all the rest of it, there's plenty of fodder there to really show to America, this is not somebody who should be allowed into the White House, not even on the tours. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be taking phone calls as soon as we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to start grabbing phone calls here. Guy in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Happy St. Patty's Day.
Happy Mr. Patty's Day.
Yes. Hey, I heard on a Major 640 radio program this morning saying that people want an open convention. They're already disenfranchising people and warming up the crowds to an open convention for Trump on the radio.
Yeah, well, that's what the radio is going to be doing. The establishment media is out there trying to convince us this is a good thing. Really, you don't want your candidate. You want a brokered convention. You want the party leadership to decide for you. You're all such, innocent little minds. You shouldn't trouble yourself with the political running of this country.
Yep. And the other thing I have for you is, if they're willing to go after a guy who polished Hitler's shoes during World War II, why don't they go after Soros, like the JDL go after Soros for a Nazi collaboration at least?
He's got too much money.
Make him feel non-gratis. I mean, give him a non-gratis like all these other people they're getting, like, you can't go to Britain. There's a few.
Why don't they go after Brown Brothers Harriman in New York City? They funded Adolf Hitler's rise to power. They're still there. I walked past their building when I was there for the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
Well, it seems perfectly sensible to go after these guys when they run out of their last victims that they can come after.
Oh, well, no. What Israel's going to do is they're going to start digging up Nazi war criminals and retrying them and then killing them again and burying them to keep this whole thing going again. By the way, I had a reader write in and, asking about the Jews who currently claim Israel, do they really belong there? And of course the answer is no. And so we've reposted a link to the book, The 13th Tribe, which talks about how the European and Russian Jews are not descendants of the biblical Hebrews. They are descendants of Khazars who converted to Judaism in about 800 AD. And then when Khazar fell, they migrated north into Russia, westward into Europe. That's where the Ashkenazis come from. And then now they've gone back down to Israel and say this is our homeland, which makes about as much sense as me adopting the religion of the Native Americans and then claiming I'm one of the original inhabitants of this land and all you Europeans have to get out.
Yeah, it's crazy. And as far as that Northridge situation goes, or Porter Ranch, I heard that there was multiple wells that were leaking, not just the one that was the biggest problem. So they need to have a check on all the wells that are going on over there.
Well, never ask a question you don't want the answer to, and our government is trying to distract everybody from the failing infrastructure, because we all know if the infrastructure is not being cared for, that is the responsibility and the fault of the government. And we were reporting, the people have been told it's okay, you can go back into Porter Ranch, and they're getting sick from the methane in the air. Just like the Japanese government told everybody you can move back into Fukushima, and now they're all dealing with elevated levels of cancer and leukemia. The government doesn't care about you. They just want to get you back to work and paying taxes and supporting the economic system. The money has become the God on earth. And I'm a Renaissance man. I want humans at the center of the universe, not currency, not theocracy. People as the center of the universe. That's the Renaissance philosophy.
Mike, are you familiar with the show Caravan to Midnight?
I've heard of it. I've never watched it.
Well, I suggest you check a couple of the shows. Excellent programming. You would enjoy it. All
right. Well, thank you very much. I will look into that. And let's grab Jack in Illinois real quick. What's on your mind?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. What is your fax number?
I actually don't have a fax number. It's so 20th century. You can send me things by email, and the address is at the top of the website, okay?
Well, I have a document, though, I want to send. How would I do that? Do you have a mailing address?
Yes, I do, and it's if you go to the donate page at WhatReallyHappened.com, there's a post box address there, and you can send a document to that address.
Okay, I go to the post office. Say again, please.
Okay, you go to WhatReallyHappened.com, and up at the top in the bar, there's a link that says donate. It's over there on the right. It's right underneath the top banner. And on the donation page, there's a mailing address where you can send things to, okay?
Thank you ever so much.
All right, you got it. And we're going to switch over to Andrew in New York. Aloha, Andrew. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I want to talk about how Israel's trying to protect the secret and has been always trying to go after people who question the Holocaust.
Yes.
And I didn't do study about everything about the Holocaust, but I studied Auschwitz, and I just found out it was not what we were told about. It was what happened there was just a labor camp, and
yes.
It was not a extermination camp, and the gas chamber. I remember this Jewish guy went there, and he interviewed the guy.
David Cole.
Yeah.
And he got death threats for that, by the way.
Yeah, I know. He said that that supposed gas chamber was turned by the Russians that they liberated the camp.
No. You're talking about the crematorium at Auschwitz, which they're saying, that's where all the that was actually built by Russia after the war was over to deal with the typhus epidemics. And when you look at those photos of those very emaciated, skinny people, what you're seeing are the symptoms of typhus infection. And that was really what killed most of the people in those slave labor camps. And by the way, it was killing the Germans right along with everybody else. One of the big lies about it is that those camps were just for Jewish people. No, they weren't. Actually, there were gays in there, gypsies, mentally retarded people. Anything that was considered unfit was diverted to slave labor in order to generate military supplies for the German army. And we have a parallel in this country today, the prison industrial complex, where we have seen time and again where judges have been caught literally convicting innocent people to send them into this prison industrial complex. It's all about all about the money and letting money rule our lives. And one of the things that I do agree with Pope Francis about is that money ought to be the servant of humanity, not the other way around.
My last question is like the people that defend the Holocaust, like how come there's no way you can like question the Holocaust because they'll say oh, Hitler hated the Jews, he was the anti-Semite. You can't. They'll be like you can't deny that. Like,
well, Israel's entire political foundation for stealing Palestine is based on that myth of the Holocaust. If the Holocaust myth were exposed, then Israel's legitimate occupation of Palestine comes into question, and that's why they protect it so fiercely. It's a house of illusion and a house of cards, and it's starting to come on down. And by the way, Hitler wasn't an enemy of the Jews per se. The German people were very angry with Jewish bankers who had been doing to the Jewish economy, well, a lot of the same things we see happening here in the United States right now. But Hitler offered to give the Jews Madagascar, which is actually a much nicer place to live than Israel. But the founders of Zion said, no, we want Palestine, and we understand we're not going to get it without a lot of Jewish blood being spilt first. And so they worked to keep the Jews in the Nazi territory, knowing that they were going to be suffering persecutions as a result. And it is a very dark chapter in history, but you need to go on out and re-examine it and not let Israel's supporters scare you away from finding out the truth. Because, especially in light of all the lies we've been told more recently, like Saddam's nuclear weapons, Assad's sarin gas, and all the rest of it, prudence demands we re-examine absolutely everything we have ever been taught in the state schools and on TV and movies to find out if that's what really happened or if it's just somebody's agenda being shoved down our throats again. We're the most lied to people on the face of planet Earth here in the United States, and it's time for that to stop.
All right, thanks, Michael.
All right, we're going to let you go real quick. Randy in Texas, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I'd like to talk a bit about the Whigs and the Republicans.
Okay. We only have about 20 seconds left before the news break.
Can you hold me over?
I'll hold you over until after the news and commercial break. I'm putting you back on hold. I have a hold button, and I'm not afraid to use it. So we're coming up here on the top of our news. When we come on back, we're going to be talking with Randy in Texas. We're going to talk about snow, major snow in the northern hemisphere. And we're in the middle of March, and they've got major winter storms happening all over. Gosh darn, that human-caused global warming. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and we are going to go right back here to Randy in Texas talking about the Whig Party.
Hello, Michael. How are you doing today?
Oh, pretty well. Almost to the end of the week here.
Yes. Anyway, if you recall from your history, the Whig Party was a very strong party up until about the 1850s when they started losing elections because of the way they were operating the party, and the Republican Party came out of that. I think that the Republicans in charge of the party ought to realize that lesson.
Well, they should. Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it, and maybe history won't repeat, but it certainly rhymes from time to time, according to Mark Twain.
And I can see that happening right now, that if they go ahead and set up a broker convention and put in somebody else but Trump, when Trump has the obvious backing of most of the voters, that it's going to boomerang on them.
I would absolutely agree with you because this is not operating in a vacuum. Republican voters are still very angry over how the party leadership ejected Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012, and I think a lot of people now have this 3 strikes and you're out attitude. And we could very easily see the GOP shatter. We're even hearing that were Trump to secure the nomination, which he still can, if Ted Cruz is declining in the polls, Trump could win some of those states that are currently forecast for Cruz and put himself over that first ballot threshold. We're hearing that the present GOP party leadership is going to form a whole new party, and run an independent candidate. And from those of us who are here on the ground, it's very clear that the GOP party leadership wants to throw the White House to Hillary Clinton, whether they're being paid to do it or whether they're being blackmailed or whether they're concerned that Hillary will carry out her rumored threat to blow the whistle on all the scandals of the last quarter century and bring the federal government down. But at this point, one thing is very obvious. The GOP leadership is not serving the interests of the GOP voters, and the GOP voters ought to stop signing those checks.
Oh, yeah, it's getting pretty bad. I mean, here's my prediction. If Donald Trump loses in a brokered convention, he's going to go third party. I don't know how well that effort will go, but I can tell you one thing: it will do what the GOP is trying to do, which is to throw the election to Hillary.
Well, I have to be very honest and disagree with you. I think if Trump were to go third party, you would see disaffected voters from both parties flock to him. I'd be out there in the streets getting petitions signed for him. Absolutely. I think we could conceivably see all of America say, okay, let's forget the Republicans and forget the Democrats. We want Donald Trump, and put him over the top. His main obstacle, I mean, right now Trump has the support of more than half of the American population right now. The only thing standing in his way of being on the ballot in November is he's going to have to mount petition drives in every one of the 50 states and all of the territories to get on the general election ballot. And with all the angry people who are out there at what has been done, I think it is certainly possible to do.
Yep. Well, you know, it's like there's that old Chinese proverb that says, may you live in interesting times.
Well, it's often misquoted. The actual curse, it's a Chinese curse. May you be a person of influence in interesting times. And I'm beginning to appreciate that. And again, I would follow up with another proverb, if you will, from John F. Kennedy. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. I do not want to see that happen. But unfortunately, it does look like the entrenched elites are not willing to surrender their control over our wealth and our lives without some bloodshed involved. Because they're already ginning up their brown shirts to cause violence at all the Trump rallies.
Yeah, and we all know what happened to the original brown shirts after they served their purpose.
Oh, yes, the night of the long knives. If you're one of George Soros or Hillary's thugs, you know, go and research the night of the long knives, because that will tell you how your attacks on Donald Trump supporters, how you attempt to steal the election on behalf of your masters, how you will be rewarded for that. Night of the long knives.
Oh, yes. I've read history and I've read up on the night of the long knives. And, yeah, basically, they threw everyone under the bus.
Yep, they did. It was very ugly. Anyway, Randy, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to get back to some of the news here. Skipping on back to the issue about computers, we've been talking for a long time about this very arrogant attitude of Microsoft. You will upgrade to Windows 10. You will not keep your Windows 7. You will not keep your permanent licenses. You will not keep Windows 8. You will go to Windows 10 and you will pay rental for your computers from now on. Sigai. And now it is coming on out, and this is over in the Register in Great Britain. Microsoft is using malware technology to get past your defenses, to force their latest operating system on your computer. And the Get Windows 10 has become the world's foremost PC pest. They've literally turned it into malware, trying to get past your security services to try and force you. And they're really angering computer users. They're encouraging the move to open source and Linux. And you'd think Microsoft would have to realize this is already a failure. Windows 10 was supposed to goose the sale of new PCs and laptops, and it hasn't happened. People hate Windows 10. It is one of the worst operating systems Microsoft has ever released. And they've released it with all kinds of problems and bugs. and they're trying to force this buggy nightmare down everybody's throat, and everybody is just saying, what the heck is going on up there in Redmond, Washington? And now we find out they're using malware techniques. They're going out to the hackers and the cyber criminals, and they're saying, you know, teach us how to get our operating system onto these people's computers so that we can enslave them to a rental software economy. Little article, this is out of Popular Science, reminding us all that for all the talk about Mr. Patrick, getting rid of the snakes in Ireland back in the 5th century AD, the fossil record shows Ireland never had snakes. It is an island, separated by quite a wide bit of ocean, more than snakes could cross. And so Ireland has never actually had any kind of native snake whatsoever. Now, in the days of mass shipping and everything, that may change. Hawaii is an island, and it has no native snakes, but unfortunately snakes have been brought in inside cargo shipments that were not being properly inspected. We have an ongoing problem with the brown tree snake, which is eating the eggs of many of our endangered species of birds. But Ireland didn't actually have snakes. You don't suppose those Irish are being full of blarney again, are you? First of all, calling Mr. Patrick a saint when he's never been canonized? Gosh, what's wrong with those Irish people? I'll have to talk to Claire about that. Now then, on a more serious note, article out of QZ.com, many scientific truths are in fact false, and they're talking about how back in 2005, John Ioannidis, a professor of medicine at Stanford University, published a paper on why most published research findings are false, mathematically showing that a huge number of these so-called peer-reviewed published papers must be incorrect. And basically found that of the ones that he studied from well-regarded medical research findings, 34 were retested, 41% have been contradicted or found to be exaggerated. Now hold that thought. We're going to come back to it after these commercials. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this article over in QZ.com. Many scientific truths are in fact false. And starting back in 2005, when John Ioannidis, a professor of medicine at Stanford University, published this paper, Why Most Published Research Findings Are False, there has been a surge in research scientists going back and actually applying the principle of reproducibility to various published studies. And we're talking about studies published in the most prestigious, trusted journals. And they're amazed at how many they're finding can't be reproduced, how many are full of errors. We were talking yesterday about how the British medical journal Lancet published an anti-gun study, which is so flawed, even the gun grabbers are distancing themselves from it. And they're all scratching their heads and wondering what's going on. Well, it's not that difficult to explain. The reason there is a scientific method is an admission up front that individual scientists are just as corruptible as individual politicians, individual clergy, anybody else. They need funding. They want fame. They want to win the awards, just like anybody else. And it can bias their perceptions of what they're doing. And so for proper scientific method, you perform a study or an experiment, you put out your raw data and your methodology, and other people come in and check your work. And after it's been reproduced, then it's considered valid. But we have seen as science becomes corporatized and politicized, that validation procedure is simply bypassed. Oh, it's in the Lancet. You should just believe it. And now the science community is starting to go back and look at some of these studies, and they're finding an alarmingly large number of these research papers in prestigious journals can't be validated, can't be reproduced. Which brings us to the subject of human-caused global warming. We have the updated Minnesota snowfall reports from around the Northland. 13 inches in Lutsen, 12.3 inches in Gunflint Trail, 12 inches in Cook, Toft, Taconite Harbor, 11.8 inches in Snowbank Lake, 11.5 inches in Silver Bay, on and on and on and on and on. And there's a winter storm warning in effect until, noon today, which is already passed. Al Gore and his minions went on out with a bunch of money saying, we are going to fund researchers to prove humans are warming the earth. And there was no end of researchers saying, sure, give me money, I'll prove that humans are warming the earth. I mean, last week I was proving that candy bars are good nutrition for lunch, which is another major scientific scandal from back in the 1980s. Scientists want to have funding. They don't want to have to go on out and get regular jobs. They want to be famous. They want media attention. They want to be the next Carl Sagan. And they understand that if they come on out with a report that says, I've discovered this interesting phenomenon, it doesn't really mean much of anything, they're going to be ignored. There'll be no more funding. But if they come out with that same research and say, I've discovered an interesting phenomenon and it could be the end of the world, the media is going to show up, the money's going to pour on in, and they're going to be doing really good. A lot of the mistakes that were made in the early days of tracking down AIDS were because the various research agencies were rushing as fast as they could to identify something they could slap a patent on. Now, speaking of greed and patents here, India has responded to Monsanto's refusal to accept cotton royalty cuts by saying, okay, leave. India's government is saying the greed has to end. Their domestic cotton industry and their farmers are suffering greatly under the high costs of Monsanto's GM cotton seeds. And India suggested a cut in the royalty to balance things. Monsanto said, no, we own all the world's seed. And India said, you can get out. You can leave. Now remember that BT cotton scandal in India, where the government encouraged their cotton farmers to plant this BT cotton, and it turned out to be far less drought resistant than the natural variety. And they had all these cotton farms going out of business because their plants weren't producing, and there was an epidemic of suicides across the country. Genetic technology is the most dangerous technology we've ever played with. It's far more dangerous even than nuclear power. Yes, we've had some bad disasters. 3 Mile Island, WIP, Hanford, Chernobyl, Fukushima. And those are serious problems with serious consequences. But the GMO companies are tinkering with the code of life, and they are doing it very recklessly. One of the most dangerous practices that we have seen is companies will go on in and tinker with a gene to produce a desired result. But DNA is very self-referential. The whole genome is referencing itself all over the place. And you cannot tinker with one part of the genome without producing results across the entire organism. One of the better known examples of this is the Roundup Ready corn, which along with being resistant to the Roundup pesticide, also produced corn stalks far tougher than the natural variety. And corn farmers had to buy Kevlar-belted tires for their tractors to avoid punctures. Now, that's a minor inconvenience, I will grant you. But it underscores the fact that when they change something in an organism to produce a desired result, there are going to be changes elsewhere. And nobody's looking for them. There's no way to predict them. And they often don't manifest until they're well out there in the consumer market. And once that altered DNA is out there in the form of pollen, there's no getting it back. I'm still very, very concerned over this epicite gene, which was developed under a U.S. Department of Agriculture grant. And it produces corn where if you eat it, it triggers antibodies to human sperm. Meaning if you eat this corn, you cannot have children. And if that pollen were to break into the wild and contaminate all the corn, you're looking at a potential extinction level event. Now, the United States has seen a significant drop in birth rates over the last few years. Partly that's explained by the economy, people choosing not to have children. But interestingly enough, the birth rate drop has been sharpest among the Hispanic population, who are the highest per capita consumers of corn in the nation. Do we know epicide is involved? No. Do we know it's not involved? No. Nobody's looking. Nobody's keeping watch on this. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call here from Anthony up in Canada. Aloha, Anthony. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. You know what? You keep bringing up Ted Cruz and him being born in Canada. You know what? Us Canadians are not that bad. I don't think that would hurt you guys that bad. So I don't think...
No. I'm not saying that. I mean, I love Canada every time I've been there. I mean, when I was a speaker at this conference in Montreal, I was treated very well. Everybody's polite. I love Canada and Canadian people. But the rules are the rules are the rules are the rules. And the
I'm being sarcastic.
Oh, okay. All right.
Just being sarcastic. Just a funny thing. I got an email. I'm actually still on J Street's emailing list. And it's funny. I got an email just a few hours ago, and it goes, J Street opposes Donald Trump because of his racism and bigotry, and it's against Jewish values. And it's kind of funny. I wonder how Israel's actions in Gaza reflect on their values. You know what I mean? And they have the gall to talk about, Donald Trump. And it was funny. I was listening to an interview with Max Blumenthal yesterday, and he was talking about Trump in relation to the Israel lobby. And he says even though, he completely supports Israel, he's even supported Netanyahu in the past, the fact that they don't have a 100% lock on him makes them go crazy. And
yeah, that's exactly what's going on. They want a total slave. They don't want anybody with an independent thought in their mind regarding Israel and Palestine in that Oval Office. And I'll tell you what really illustrates the hypocrisy of this attack on Donald Trump. They're all going ballistic over Donald Trump wanting to build a wall across the border between the United States of America and Mexico, and yet none of them dare criticize that wall that Israel's been building deep into Palestinian land all across their country. And so why is Israel's apartheid wall good and Donald Trump's national border wall bad? Somebody explain that to me, because I'm not getting it.
Well, and it's funny, when he brought that up in the debates, all the other Republican candidates couldn't say anything. He'd bring that up during the debates at times, and all the other Republican contenders were had no response for that. So it's kind of funny. You're absolutely right. So it's kind of thing. The one other part I want to talk to, I also listened to an interview with Paul Craig Roberts yesterday, and he doesn't really expect much out of Trump, and there's a few reasons. One of the things he said is that even if he manages to win, all of his advisors and so forth still need to get approved by Congress. He still needs to deal with the Republican Congress, and that he's really not going to be able to do as much as he says he's going to do. And you know what? There's still the possibility that he might sell out. And this is the thing. If that were to happen, it would almost be better that he not win, because I think if he were to actually get in and end up selling people out, that could completely demoralize the whole movement he's created. So where if he doesn't win the election and people think that he was screwed over it, that actually might reinvigorate the movement. So there's that possibility where maybe him not winning might actually be better in some ways. I
disagree with that. And I'll tell you why. Because once we know that Trump has the nomination, we all need to turn our focus onto giving Congress an enema and basically voting out all these incumbents who are pro-Israel, pro-war, pro-Wall Street, and we need to work to give Donald Trump a Congress that will work with him, and then we'll avoid that whole situation that you're talking about.
Okay, fair enough. Obviously easier said than done, but I guess going forward, that's one of the things we'll have to work towards. So that's it. Thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting Trump the nomination is not the end of this fight. We need to get Donald Trump a Congress that will work with him, and that means getting rid of all these people standing up there saying, I'm a friend of Israel. Okay, move there. Let's round up all these friends of Israel inside Congress, put them on a giant cargo plane, and ship them over to Tel Aviv. If they love the place so much, why aren't they there? We need a Congress that loves America, that stands by America. We need leaders who put America first, second, and third. And I am sick and tired of all these members of the Congress going over to Israel to touch the remains of that Roman fort and say, I'm a friend of Israel. I love Israel. Oh, okay, great. You're allowed to love Israel. That's covered by the First Amendment. Kindly move there. Vacate your office for somebody who's going to do the job for the United States of America and the American people. That's what we need. Getting Trump the nomination is not the end. It is the beginning of a major fight to take back our government from those who would subvert it. Now then, not too long ago, the hacker collective Anonymous announced they were declaring war on Donald Trump. And I've had my doubts about Anonymous all along, because they never seem to do anything that would really bring about a change, like digging into our corrupt politicians and finding out what's going on. If anybody should have been in there exposing the secrets inside Hillary's email server, it should have been Anonymous. It wasn't. It was this other guy in Europe, Guccifer. Anonymous doesn't seem to go after the entrenched elites. They're just out there doing a bunch of other things. I think they're part of the establishment, and I think their declaration of war on Donald Trump is proof of that. Anonymous now has leaked Donald Trump. What they claim is Donald Trump's Social Security number and his private phone number. And Anonymous is vowing to hack and shut down his campaign websites and anybody who supports him. All of this qualifies as acts of terror under the USA Patriot Act. Why isn't the government going after them? Why isn't the Department of Justice arresting them under the Patriot Act? Because Anonymous is working for the U.S. government. It's another made-up group, like the Symbionese Liberation Army, or Al-Qaeda, or ISIS. All right, let's talk a little bit about science. We're going to go ahead and close our phone lines for the rest of the day. Interesting little article coming out of Business Insider. Scientists have managed to grow crops on Mars-like soil. Obviously, with all the landers and rovers that we've had on Mars, we have a pretty good idea what the soil is like, including its hyperchlorate content. And somebody did an experiment where they created an artificial plot of Martian soil and were able to produce crops on it, which is a necessary step to creating a self-sustaining colony, if you will, on the planet Mars, because it's way too long to consider any kind of constant resupply flights going on. But there's a problem. That Martian soil that they created on Earth may not be complete, because although it is still officially unrecognized, the labeled release experiment on the Viking landers designed by Dr. Gilbert Levin, please remember his name, returned a positive result indicating indigenous microbial life is alive on Mars. Now, NASA went with a negative result from the GCMS, which we now know couldn't have worked because of the perchlorates in the soil. NASA was playing it safe. They were playing politics. There was a huge outcry, especially among the religious right. There can't be life on Mars. It means that we're not special and God doesn't sit up nights to admire us. So here is our problem. If Dr. Levin was right, and I've looked at the raw data myself, and I think he is, there is microbial life on Mars. We'd better find it and study it to see if and how it will interact with the biochemistry of Earth plants before we start chowing down on crops grown in the Martian soil. Now, as it turns out, that may be solved because the Russian and Europe space agencies have just launched a mission, ExoMars, to the Red Planet, and this pair of spacecraft are specifically going to be looking to find if there is currently indigenous life on Mars. And I'm willing to wager a plugged Turkish piastre, they're going to come up with a yes. And when they do, everybody needs to remember Dr. Gilbert Levin and not cheat him of his place in the history books. Because let's be honest, in every planet's history, there's only one point where you learn you are not alone in the universe. And this is it. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and our last segment on our Mr. Patrick's Day show. They had a little bit of a celebration over in Great Britain. We're now getting pictures and videos of, apparently they had a large meteor come down over Great Britain, which left a green trail. Everybody's, huzzah, huzzah, which is not that uncommon. When you look at the metallic meteorites, the siderites, they're composed of iron and nickel. And if there is a big chunk of nickel in there, it's going to leave a green flash and a green trail. So they're all very happy over there at their little celebration meteor. Now, over in Pennsylvania, there is some very great unhappiness going there. It's being reported in a bunch of sources. Raw Story has a story about the Pennsylvania grand jury has found 50 Roman Catholic priests raped hundreds of children. Over 4 decades, bishops covered up their actions, and this is going back a very long period. And they just seem to get away with it time and time and time again. Another story on the same exact topic. This is over at CN High News, or High News. Staggering priest sex abuse disclosed in Pennsylvania diocese by grand jury. And for some reason, I don't know if it's a statute of limitations, none of the surviving priests or bishops can be prosecuted. And what's really interesting in this report is how even after these bishops knew these priests were committing these assaults, they were returned to full ministry with the full knowledge that, yes, they had done this. Now, on that same category over in the Daily Mail, they have another story, dozens of Church of England officials, just so that I'm not just picking on the Catholics. Dozens of Church of England officials ignored sex abuse victims for decades despite being told of horrific abuse at the hands of pedophile clergymen. Now, you all remember Jared Fogle used to be the spokesman for Subway Sandwich. He was the guy who was very heavy, and then he lost a huge amount of weight, claiming that he was eating only at the Subway Sandwich shop, and Subway grabbed him. They made him a spokesman. They made him very, very rich, and it all came to an end when it came out that he had been abusing small children. And he's lost his stardom, and he's now in prison, and apparently he got jumped at the Rec Yard in Englewood Prison in Colorado, where an inmate named Stephen Nigg simply knocked him down and then just beat him up. Nigg apparently has a problem with child molesters, which I can understand. And you need to remember, prisons do have a social order, a hierarchy, based on what it is you did that got you in there. Child molesters are at the very, very bottom. I don't have a problem with that. I'm a very tolerant individual about most behavior. I'm hardly anybody's ideal. I shouldn't be held up as a model of behavior for anybody, by any parents or anything. But, you know, live and let live, whatever works for you, fine. But when it comes to little kids, some very primal instincts kick in. And I get very angry at these stories that we keep hearing about all of this. When you do that sort of thing with a child, it's more than a sexual assault. You are taking away their innocence and their childhood. And there's no way to put it back. You can't repair that kind of damage. People can grow past sexual abuse, but once you've stolen their childhood from them, they can't get it back. In a slightly different vein, if you remember Michael Jackson, because of his young stardom, never got to have a normal childhood. And I actually got to work with him very early on a one of his music videos when he was still black. And I remember seeing him just surrounded by all of his handlers and producers and all the people who were making huge amounts of money off this kid and thinking that had to be the loneliest person in the world. He was not allowed any contact with the real world. And I think that's why years later at his Neverland Ranch, where he had all the amusement park rides and everything, he was trying to reconstruct a childhood for himself, which doesn't mean I condone his behavior with young boys there either. That was definitely, definitely wrong. Now, I am a huge fan of the TV series Pawn Stars. Probably most of you are. And in another Fall from Grace story, the actor who plays Chumley has apparently been arrested on multiple crimes stemming from a raid of his house by police who were investigating an allegation that he had sexually assaulted a woman at his home. Now, the guy's real name is Austin Lee Russell.
Namaste.
Whoops, sorry. Forget about that. Austin Lee Russell. And the police went to his house to investigate this allegation that he assaulted a woman. And in the search of the house, they found a large number of guns and illegal drugs. Apparently, Chumley had a place in his home called the Chum Chum Room, which had a stripper pole right in the middle of it. Lifestyles of the rich and famous. And they found multiple baggies of marijuana in different weights. They found digital scales. They found a bag with a still unidentified white powdery substance and a rolled-up dollar bill with the same white substance on there, from which we can all tell what's going on. Only 4 of the firearms recovered were registered in Russell's name. And there is a law in Nevada that if you are using illicit substances, you are automatically prohibited from owning any firearms at all. So he's been arrested on the firearms charge. He's out on $63,000 bail and facing court, I think, in May. Now, Pawn Stars was not filming at the time, and we don't know if this is going to adversely affect the show itself. Certainly, Chumley's not going to be on it ever again, I think. Remember how Dog the Bounty Hunter was kicked off the air briefly because Dwayne used the N-word in a private phone conversation that got leaked by a vindictive relative. But this is pretty bad. And I do like the show. A lot of history in there. And it's easy for us to condemn Chumley, but I have seen this before when I was working in Hollywood, where, I mean, and I'm not excusing his behavior, but you have somebody who's basically, he's socially awkward, he's not particularly attractive, and then all of a sudden, through sheer luck, he becomes a TV star. He's very popular on the show. He's one of the icons of the show, and he's got a lot of money all of a sudden. And that kind of fame and sudden wealth can tempt you into making some very foolish decisions. And it's not like we have not seen these kind of stories before. And I'm not making excuses for him. But it was a bit of a shock to see this aspect of his life contrasted with his on-air persona. And it's a reminder that what you see on TV and movies is crafted. Even in the reality shows, they're not real. It's all put together. We know that in Storage Wars, which is another fun show, one of the regulars who broke from the show said that, yeah, they plant stuff in those lockers to find, oh, look what I found, a treasure. And which is why a lot of people who started going out and buying storage lockers and they never found anything, and they're saying, what's going on? These people on the show, they're finding all these wonderful treasures. Well, they were planted there for the show. Speaking of shows in trouble, I keep hearing more reports from BBC's attempt to resurrect Top Gear. They've run into trouble. They spent something like £100,000 for a car stunt around what's called the Cenotaph in London, leaving tire tracks on some very revered ground, and BBC is now saying they're just going to dump that sequence entirely. It really was Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond that made that program work. There's the music. Time for us to get on out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, here on GCN. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3. And until then, please take all these videos of that preacher saying kill the gays with Ted Cruz, Hillary's spy story, all of that stuff. Get it on out there into social media. We are having an impact. We can still take this country back. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.